Hello everyone, welcome back to KOTESOL Conversations. I'm really excited for this episode today on emerging ELT technologies. When thinking about this topic, there were two people I immediately had in mind, and I have them both here today, so that makes me very, very happy. I have James Papple and Raquel Ribeiro. First, James, could you introduce yourself to our lovely audience?
My name is James Papple. I'm the Associate Director at York University's English Language Institute. And, I love technology. I love playing around with it just in my own time. And I love being able to talk about it with different organizations. So thank you very much for the invitation.
Oh, you're welcome. Happy you accepted. And Raquel?
Hi, everyone. So I'm Raquel Ribeiro. I've been an English teacher for a very long time. And since 2012, I started blogging about my experiences using technology here in São Paulo, Brazil. And we have many challenges here in South America, and that's why I share the experiences and findings. And I'm also a project that I'm very, very proud of is the book. I'm a co-author of Evolve book series that has this nuance of using technology too. So I'm a teacher, and I believe in the power of technology to complement the learning path of a foreign language. Thank you for the invitation. I'm very glad to be here.
Thank you for joining. So let's jump straight into the heart of emerging technologies in English language teaching. Raquel, what are some technologies that are emerging right now in English language teaching?
I believe that in our field, there is this challenge of finding out the resources, the apps or sites, and finding a way to adjust it to the need of English language teaching for communicative purposes. The pandemic brought this massive curiosity looking at the tools, but then it's something to consider that it's not about the number of tools, but it is how those tools can help and assist our learners in this path to communicate better as a foreign speaker of the language. So there are many, many tools. And I believe that right now there has been a rise again, looking into virtual reality related tools. If you've been following technology and the talks and research within our field, there was a moment before the pandemic where some people were even doubting the possibility and considering that, okay, this is in the past, nobody's going to talk about virtual reality anymore. I read articles about that and I was like, okay, I'm still not convinced. So I think there is this interest and also artificial intelligence, but something really important, and I think that somehow divides and polarizes the teacher community, are the applications of artificial intelligence in terms of assisting our learners or in terms of just being some sort of monitoring behind the scenes. I think this is what is most dreadful, as I have noticed.
And James, you have done a lot of work in virtual reality, augmented reality. Is this something that is really taking off now? Because to me, still, when I think of virtual reality, I think of things like The Matrix, or there's an old movie, The Lawnmower Man. Is this something that is happening in our world right now that we might be teaching in a virtual world?
Well, one of the interesting things for me, I've actually been watching some different schools, and I've seen programs in virtual reality and augmented reality pop up over the last year, especially in several different countries and in several different schools. So I know that it is happening. And I think one way that I can recognize that there's a bit of a sea change there is I've seen some virtual reality companies, particularly those focused on English language training, who are now, sponsors of different conferences. At TESOL this year, I think one of the gold sponsors was such a company. So you can see that there is this change that's happening. It may not be quite the speed yet of other technologies, but it is emerging. And I think, like Raquel was saying, obviously artificial intelligence is evolving rapidly, and we're seeing it infiltrate into our learning management systems through simulations and through our hybrid learning systems that are coming out as well. So one other emerging technology, it's sort of already emerged, but I see it maybe happening more frequently in the ELT setting, is the ubiquitousness of 3D printing and being able to create a mock-up in the class, in real time.
Raquel, to people who are listening and they don't really know much about virtual reality and how it could be applied to English language teaching, what would be the benefit of virtual reality in our classrooms or in our teaching?
Well, one thing to consider is that when we mention the use of such support resources, it doesn't mean that it's going to be a VR-based class. So this is one of the things I get asked all the time. So it means that I'm not going to use my course book, my board. No, it's not about that.
Right.
It's about promoting the experience for a very short while of visiting a location which is probably far away from where you're based, so that your learner has a communicative experience that can be more intense and more encouraging to exchange ideas with the others. And then as a teacher, we guide them through that. For instance, let's imagine I'm here based in São Paulo, South America. And we are studying about traveling and the description, the architecture of cities. So maybe I divide my students and I have them in pairs, and each person in a pair is going to visit a different location, for instance, London and Berlin. And then they visit this location for a short while and talk about it based on their level of English. So if it's a very elementary group, maybe the questions will be, is there, are there, can you see? And if it's a more advanced group, we can go beyond that. And of course, there is this issue of the resources, having or not a Google Cardboard box, for instance, or even using the students' very own mobile phones. And I think this is really important in everything I research and blog about. Is it possible to be replicated in a context with less resources? Because I very much believe in this right that regardless of where we are based, and I'm based in a very diverse country, the realities all over Brazil, all over my state of São Paulo, are really, really different and unfortunately unfair very often. But with creativity, we can use free resources too for this purpose.
And that's interesting. Yeah, in Korea, I'm very fortunate. Most of my students are very, you might say, advanced technology, very fast internet. They've all got unlimited data most of the time, very nice smartphones. But yeah, if we want this to be applied to classrooms all around the world, that would be a bigger challenge. James, you have a lot of experience with VR, AR. What's been your experience with virtual reality?
Well, I've had the opportunity to teach with VR and AR, and I was quite surprised actually, because I was expecting that being immersed in a world would be sort of the selling feature, I guess, to the students. But what I found actually, because our pilot was to actually build items, 3D models in VR and AR. And it was in the construction of the building of those models that actually most of the language happened, and where I saw the real magic shine. Like, I do believe that if you're going to put the VR goggles on, it could take you to an exotic or a dangerous place that maybe you wouldn't be able to go to under normal circumstances. And so there's clearly applications there. But seeing students spend time with artifacts in VR and AR, and being able to manipulate them, talk about them outside of the use of the system. That was where the magic happened, because they'd be like, what can we add to it? What can we build to it? They'd research on it, and the stickiness of the experience of wow, this is really cool, translates into the rest of the work that they were doing. And I thought that was really neat. And we had students that were using the Google Cardboard, and others that were using more expensive technology, Oculus and whatnot, to experience it. And it was a very similar effect regardless of the technology that they were using. So that was really surprising to me, and something that kind of lingers.
I'm just wondering, James, let's say you have a lesson, so you said you used it in your classes, so you would have like a lesson on, I don't know, visiting a certain place, and you'd put the headset on, students would go to Paris and order a coffee in a cafe, or how exactly were you using it in the lesson plans?
Yeah, so in our case, we had sort of a zoo kind of trip, like that was available in VR. And what they were asked to do was to create a model of an animal. And so we had people that would, create models of things that were extinct, like dinosaurs or dodos, or that sort of thing. And it was really fascinating to watch them try to take material that was already out there, open source, in order to construct the model. But then to try to build an exhibit around it, like, what do you want to say about this thing? People are going to interact with it. That was what was really the coolest part. The building of the model took, a few hours, in some cases a lot more. We did a thing with tourism, and we ended up, I live close to Toronto, so we tried to build a model of the CN Tower. And we spent more time trying to get the model to be vertical rather than horizontal. But you learn so much through the doing of it, and learning how to get the textures right, to get the polygon count right, so that it's accessible on different devices, was fantastic. It was such an additional learning experience for the students, well beyond the actual task itself.
I'm wondering, Raquel, do you think VR will become a staple of many classrooms in the future? Is it going to be like a niche thing that some teachers do, or is it going to become widespread, do you think?
I believe that there's room for that, but it depends on encouraging factors for that. For instance, before the pandemic, the scenario was we could have one VR goggle and share that among students, because that was the understanding in the world before the pandemic. And as we had to go remote teaching, and for a while I thought, okay, maybe the virtual reality integration with the content may be over. But then I had this idea, said, okay, maybe what if they access the 360-degree videos with their mobile phones and just look around that and have the possible experience? Because when we are teaching in more challenging circumstances, we have to go from what can be considered the perfect scenario, which I don't really like this word, but just to explain, into what is possible to be done with the resources available. So I believe that in order to have this VR experience more present in a larger scale, and not only a niche of tech-savvy teachers who go around using that and having this feeling, for instance, okay, but maybe she teaches with better resources. I'm fortunate in my experience to be in not only in my language schools, but in regular schools, giving training for state teachers here in São Paulo. The public schools in Brazil have huge challenges, and then we have to be very creative. But answering your question, I see the potential, but we need to have this understanding with the teachers and show them more practical ways. And then according to the reality of each city, of each country. But there needs to be maybe a more consistent movement of the publishers integrating this into the materials developed, also the websites or the apps, and be really closer to the teacher who is in the field teaching. Okay, so you teach a group of a number of children here, and the conditions are these. And it's really important to share, going beyond this sci-fi hype that pushes teachers away. You have to go, okay, there is this woohoo, amazing things, but we are not scientists, we are teachers. And our responsibility and our calling, it's actually like this. If you talk to a teacher who's there interacting with the students on a daily basis, is to every class give our students elements to be a better speaker of the language. We are foreign speakers like myself, and then how can we learn this language and be ourselves in this foreign language, which is part of the world communication. So I see that. And I really like what James mentioned here, that there is also learning beyond the class. It's, of course, we use watching this VR video, for instance, the example I mentioned, for about a minute, because there are also health concerns that we need to be very aware of. So it's not like, okay, you're going to be half an hour in a goggles just for the sake of entertainment. They've got entertainment, all right, but the thing is, that's going to give our brain a different stimuli to talk about it and to even dream about things. When I was teaching remotely and I decided to experiment on that, I have here, can I project this right now?
Sure, no problem.
Okay, so I even asked them to assist me on this filming, and the experience was they had to visit museums, and because we were remote from each other, I asked them to share the videos with me. So they had to visit galleries and find out about arts in different countries. So there was this one, there is another one, which I can find as well. And it's amazing the possibilities we have got. It's also about trusting our learners. It's not only the teacher has all the knowledge. It's like, okay, the teacher guides you through a learning discovery. And I believe this is one of the things virtual reality brings. And the reason I'm not talking so much about augmented reality, it's because under the conditions I teach, this is not accessible. I really tried, but it would take a lot more. So I had to pause the project because it couldn't be used within the reality I teach, okay? So there's room for a lot more. And I believe the way is keep investigating and exchanging ideas.
It looks very exciting. I've never done virtual reality or augmented reality in my classrooms, and just those little clips you showed there, Raquel, it's like, I just wonder what the reaction from my students would be in Korea. I guess they would be very excited jumping into a virtual world or doing something with their smartphone. Has that been your experience, James, when you use this in your classes? Do students really take to it, or is there some reluctance? How have students responded?
Well, I would say the response has been pretty universally appealing. You know, if I think back to really any technology that I've brought into a class, I'm always, and I don't know why it keeps shocking and surprising me, but it's a nice shock because, you know, often you see your class in one way because that's the way you're interacting with them. And I remember bringing in a Lego Mindstorm, you know, the robotic Lego. And I had a student that was very quiet and reserved and not particularly engaged. And that particular lesson, you know, he was the leader. He was, I guess, quite a Lego fan, you know, in his personal life. And, you know, he was the one taking charge for the first time in the class. And I thought, this has opened up a whole nother world, you know, to the student, for me to be able to see this student. And I think that there's something to be said for virtual reality. I see that there could be ways while maybe accessibility is still an issue that needs to be overcome, obviously with not just the financial components, but for those with differing abilities, they're going to struggle, in VR at the moment. But I think things are rapidly changing. But I think of some of my students who had, say, speech impediments before or anxiety around speaking, and being able to be in a virtual environment where you're represented by an avatar. I've seen the effect where a student has taken a nickname, an English name, and how it's changed their personality because they can, present themselves as somebody different and maybe explore in a different way. And I think there's something to be said, and I've witnessed this already in the limited times that I've worked in VR, where there's a different side that students are able to present because they don't have to worry about being self-conscious quite the same way. It's not the same to make a mistake in a virtual reality experience than it is to make one in a physical classroom where you're standing shoulder to shoulder with the others. And I think there's something really exciting about that as well. At the beginning of the pandemic, actually, just to share a little story, we were supposed to go on a trip. I live near Niagara Falls, and it's usually the highlight of the time for many of our students to be able to see the falls. But when the pandemic happened, of course, everything shut down, and that became impossible. And so, when I was watching Raquel's videos there of the tours, we grabbed our 360 camera, and it's just a cheap one, but we went out during social distancing when we were still able to kind of go out, and we filmed there so that, even though it wasn't the same as being able to be actually present, and seeing the falls live, students were able to see the 360 tour and then to be able to add to it by, throwing in links of Clifton Hill, like the tourist area right next to the falls, or to be able to label the different parts of the falls. There's actually 3 falls collectively known as Niagara Falls. And, they could put links to different things, the daredevils that went over the falls and so forth. And it was really interesting to see, while the video was something I shot, it took on a life of its own as students, of course, co-authored and added pieces into it. And I thought that was something, again, it changes the dynamic of the classroom. It becomes a different power dynamic, right? We're co-authoring now, rather than, maybe me always leading the dance, So I think there's a lot of applications there and opportunities. There's still a long way to go, though.
As you were talking, James, it just brings me lots of memories of using that. And I think what you mentioned of sharing this power balance in class is healthy. And we need to consider that as they contribute, they feel more motivated. And we feel especially happy when we see a shy student, like you mentioned, maybe not very often engaged. And then suddenly that person says, okay, I can help out with that. And this is super cool. I found here a slide of one activity. Like one student was visiting, let's say, London in VR, and the other at the same time asking questions. And the questions were very simple. So, okay, I'm looking at the city and kind of experience being there, and I'm answering simple questions in English that are part of my learning repertoire as a student. And this lasts for like 5 minutes, and then we change. So there are similar questions, and the other person is visiting another city. I'm using this because we live very far away from many countries, and this is a possibility, but we've already visited hospitals or sometimes scenes with natural disaster, things that can enhance this understanding of the situation, go beyond just looking at the photo.
When I think virtual reality, my initial impression is it sounds quite expensive. You need really expensive headsets, and you mentioned it would be difficult for many countries to start using it. If I'm just a teacher listening now and I want to jump into virtual reality, what kind of equipment would I need? Is there a way to save money doing it? Or do I need to talk to my employer and say, hey, give us a budget for VR? What would you say, Raquel?
I would say try getting a budget first, because you can't blame a person for asking a question, right? But let me show you how I started. I started with this very literally cardboard box that I bought online, and I paid something that would be $2 or even less. And then I worked with this for a while, but the pandemic taught me that if this is not available for each student, because that's the context now, you can use your students' mobile phones and the experience of just moving around as a possibility. I got this donation from Google when I had to present this for state schools, and then I presented in England. So it's a more, neat version of the cardboard box. And the school I work at also created their very own personalized cardboard boxes as well, made of plastic. But I think we need to look at possibilities. So it depends, and ask your students first how they feel about that. Okay, do you think you could experience getting to know this place better, or this inside this museum? There was another activity. I took elementary levels to visit museums in Google Arts and Culture, and they used the computer they were having classes at, or the mobile phone, what was available. And they had to explain to their colleagues why they chose to visit this specific location. I think I even have here to show you this image. And they were in the breakout room moment here, where they are talking about the things they had visited, and also writing about it and sharing the links they decided to visit. So, for instance, United States and Italy and Paris. So they have this choice, and there's a lot to talk about, even if it's an elementary level. And I'm insisting on the elementary level, because if you can do that with students who are just getting started, there's a lot more that can be done with intermediate level onwards. And with the children, don't forget, you teach animals so they can visit a forest. It's super cool, the reaction of the little ones, listening to the sounds and actually spotting the animals and saying, I can see this or that animal, and feeling super excited about it, or visiting a toy shop or Disney World somewhere. There's the element of dreaming too. But again, it's not a VR-based class. I'm talking about 10 minutes tops out of the class. Everything else in the process goes on as planned. It's just like looking at a photo for a longer time.
Yeah, so it's not like a lot of teachers imagine it. You put on a headset and you go into a world for an hour or two. James, Raquel mentions maybe there's some downsides in terms of health if you're maybe putting on a headset for too long or going into virtual reality. Is that something your students encountered or you've seen as a teacher? Maybe they, I don't know, do they get dizzy or some kind of issues?
Yeah, and actually we use the Google Cardboard as well, for our initial pilots, which is, if you have a cell phone, you're going to be able to really access at least augmented reality and mixed reality to a certain extent. So, while we're watching the cost of some of these higher price systems drop quite rapidly over the pandemic, the system that I bought pre-pandemic is now worth about to buy new is about half as much as I paid for it. So that's quite a drop already. I think there are some challenges. I was smirking, when Raquel was saying 10 minutes, because sometimes when I put the headset on, and I think I've spent 10 minutes, it's actually like an hour or two, that's flown by. I think for myself, I've watched, my son and his friends and younger people, they just jump onto it without much difficulty. I think there is a danger of getting motion sickness. I think some people are more sensitive than others around that. I think as we see the technology increasing and the frame rate increasing, that is falling away. I find that the weight of the actual system that I wear over time, after an hour or more, I can feel it in my neck a little bit if I'm wearing it. But the experience itself is so powerful sometimes that it actually you kind of don't notice. The adrenaline kicks in or whatever, and so I think there's definitely issues of being too immersed, of spending too much time in there. One of the interesting things for me that I didn't expect to find was the social aspect. I spend a lot of time just playing in VR, of course, as well. And you end up meeting people from all over the world that you're never going to actually, meet, and you end up talking with them, and making these sort of pseudo relationships, which is quite interesting. And I think that is part of the immersive experience. You end up developing a friend network that way, and you look forward to meeting people, virtually that kind of come through there. I think, some of the interesting things, like I have an app now on my own headset that allows me to, much like, Microsoft used to have the sort of, draw or paint application.
Yeah.
Now you can draw and paint in 3D in, your virtual world. But when you're finished, there is an opportunity to be able to send that CAD file to yourself in an email and then 3D print it. So like that blows my mind that I could build something in a virtual space that no one's ever seen before, and then in a couple of clicks I could have a physical version of that, a real version of that I could then pass around and show to other people in however long it takes to print. That just blows my mind. And it's coming, right? Those things are rapidly becoming reality.
Just a quick question, James. You said you can paint in virtual reality, so you put on some kind of special gloves, or how do you do that using a headset?
So really interesting. One of the things that has changed over the last 2 years, partly because of the increase in users and the drop in price around some of these things, is now the cameras that are on the top of many of the popular headsets are so refined that they can actually see your finger movements and recognize them. So you can actually just use your hand. Just like
So it picks up where you're moving your hand. And in the headset you see like a blank canvas and you're just moving your hand?
You have a blank room, not even a canvas, it's just a blank room with a toolbox that allows you to do pen, brush, just everything under the sun, airbrush, and you select those things, and then your hand becomes that thing. So your fingers maybe are the the brush itself, or the spray can, or what have you. And I'm not doing it justice. I wish I could show you a clip, but you can do very, very sophisticated things. I've seen people who are able to create a fully functional 3D model of a vehicle, a car or a helicopter or something, or a working engine. And it's accurate, because they spent enough time fiddling, and you can save, of course, and come back to it, and things like that. And it looks as good as something that you would draw in an AutoCAD program, or Adobe, or something like that. It's really that far ahead already.
Another emerging technology you mentioned earlier, Raquel, was AI. Again, I'll be honest, not knowing much about AI or how it could apply to the classroom. When I think AI, I think Terminator, I think like a machine replacing our jobs, something like that. I assume you know a lot more about AI than I do, Raquel. How do we use AI in relation to teaching? How does it affect English teachers? Is it something we use as a tool? Is it something that might replace teachers? What is it with AI?
Yeah, there is this like curiosity and a bit of fear when it comes to artificial intelligence, because it's very often related to sci-fi and things that are very, very far away from the world of teaching and education. And of course, there are lots and lots of things and speculation about something that's still in development. And there are things that we can even predict and see that becoming closer to our reality soon. And there are things I'm pretty confident that we couldn't even picture. But that's why we as society and humanity keep on researching. But when it comes to teaching, as a researcher, I look for tools and I check the potential to apply that to a teaching context where my students can benefit in terms of developing the listening skills in the foreign language and also the speaking skills. And I realized that one concept, generally speaking, in a very, very general way, is that artificial intelligence replicates human-like behaviors. And then there are certain divisions, there's machine learning, for example, and there are other fields of artificial intelligence. And I realized that the field that could be beneficial to my students and something that I could go into and find available resources had to do with the voice recognition. And as a person who studied English a long time ago, if we needed a dictionary to check a word, the dictionary would be this thick, and we would have to choose in between carrying the dictionary or carrying everything else we had, because it was a decision. It was super heavy, bulky book. And when it came to pronunciation, we had to memorize and understand a lot more in terms of the pronunciation chart, which it is a natural part of studying, but that's not what comes first to an elementary pre-intermediate learner of English. So I saw, okay, it can help us with these models of pronunciation, but there is more. It can actually make sense of what we're speaking and type their understanding. And of course, when I started looking into that 2018, by the end of 2018, it was really simple, and we would often get more nervous than actually benefit from it. We would get angry at the machine a lot more often. But then things have been evolving in a path, and then the voice recognition used in Google Docs, for example, is available in more languages. And even if you consider English, there's American English and British and Australian English, and that's very interesting to take a look at. Also, there is another free tool that is part of what I use with my students, which is the Google Assistant. Of course, people say, oh, but what if you ask questions? And it depends on the questions you ask. So for learners of English, the questions are related to knowledge of the world, to the time in different countries, to the capital of cities, to celebrities. And these are simple questions that, they are just so trivial questions. And I find this interaction a bit more productive because it goes beyond understanding the student's pronunciation, which doesn't need to be perfect, but somehow it gives them an understanding of where to go so the pronunciation is intelligible. And in case, for any reason, they mispronounce a word or it doesn't get to be right and formulate the questions they have in mind, they can go to a dictionary and double check, am I actually saying this word properly? And this is guiding students through their agency in learning, going beyond of teacher, how do you say that? How do you pronounce this? Everything. So to the point, when you're monitoring groups of students, I'm thinking here of a classroom of learners, that you have to stop this process very often due to how do I pronounce this? What is the word for that? And then when you make these two tools available to learners, they say, okay, so I'm in charge of the dictionary if we don't know a word. And you are in charge of asking the questions, and we can together find this information. And it's been very interesting. I don't prepare flashcards anymore. Just show, okay, what time is it in this, in that? No, it saves me a lot of time. I say, okay, I want them to find out the times in these countries here. I want them to find out this sort of information about this and this person. And they go and work with the results. So it saves me time as a teacher. And I believe it involves, like what James mentioned previously, even a student who doesn't seem to be very engaged for a number of reasons somehow feels, okay, I need to pay a little bit more attention here, and I can be of assistance to my colleagues, you know. It's not a perfect world because sometimes the phone is in the native language, so it starts speaking funny. So you have to teach them first how to go through the settings and add English as the first or second alternative, so it actually works. And you have to restart the phone, and maybe it works at first. So there are a few things which are part of the way. Much easier to use with teenagers because they're very quick. You just say, okay, how about that? How would you get to this thing that we need to do? And they find a way. Right? But adults do that too, and this is interesting. There are many possibilities. And again, it's not a voice recognition-based class. As a teacher, when we use a resource, we have a time in our mind, a timing for that peculiar resource, maybe course book or exercises or conversation or dictation or whatever resource we use, pretty much the same. But then you say, okay, they're going to have this experience for this amount of time in average. That's my key purpose with the language. I make this joke. We always have an agenda because we are teachers. We know we want to take our learners from this point to that point, but going through some other places along the way.
Yeah, so it sounds like AI can be a great tool in our classes. Yeah, actually, you just reminded me 2 weeks ago I was teaching and I was just covering something in the class and Siri popped up on my iPhone and I had to shut it off and, you know, I think I made a joke in the class like, no, not you, Siri, I'm talking to the students. Actually, I should be bringing Siri into my class, encouraging students to use it. It could make it more efficient, more effective. Has that been your experience, James, with AI? Have you experimented with any voice recognition technology or AI assistance?
I haven't, you know, I should do it too. I mean, I'm actually a little nervous because I have my assistant on the desk here with me, and it often goes off at inopportune times. But I think it can do amazing things in the classroom. I wish I had actually have used it. We're currently using a hybrid system, and so actually I think it would work quite well with that, where we have some students online and some students that are physically in the classroom, and it's being mediated by a it's called an owl. It looks like an owl. It's got cameras and microphones attached to it. It helps to bring those students together, and I think something like that could actually work very well to bridge that gap between the two groups. I think there is a lot that can be said about AI that we can use right away. I've seen some amazing things. Pre-pandemic, I saw a video out of Germany of Yuki, a teaching assistant robot with a physical, you know, thing that they cart in, and it does language training as well as other things. And the thing that's so impressive is that you know, it can do auto grading in the moment, of course, at the time. And I think, you know, something interesting. I mean, Raquel mentioned sort of the sci-fi aspect of it. You know, so many of us have grown up on watching, you know, Terminator and those sorts of things that, you know, we end up imprinting some of that, I think, into the technology that we end up building. It's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way. But I've seen some amazing things with robots out of Japan, where, you know, they're conversation robots, where, you know, we as humans, we would get tired and we'd run out of things to say, whereas the robot won't. But the thing that makes that even more exciting for me is that they are recording a transcript of that entire conversation, you know, however many hours that they're able to go, and then that can be uploaded or downloaded into you know, a corpus or whatever, and we can give like actual feedback to the student, in fairly short order of like, here's the mistakes that you're making, and try to, using a data-based approach, fix those sort of errors. I saw, actually, speaking of Korea TESOL or KOTESOL,
Yeah.
excellent presentations on chatbots and the value of, which is AI driven, in the background. I can tell you, I've spent some time with some chatbots that I wouldn't have known, if I wasn't told. I could have spent an hour chatting away thinking it was a human. And I've seen some really impressive things where, they are subtly working to correct mistakes that the AI is recognizing, from the language learner,
Mhm.
and that they wouldn't even know. And I've seen that also with automated writing evaluations, where, that system is helping to correct the writing as you're going, and building a better essay. And, there is maybe a negative to that, of what does this mean for academic integrity kind of going forward, as you're now beginning to co-create on a much more robust way. Like as Raquel was saying, before we bring in the dictionary, then you would use that to increase your vocabulary, or to narrowly define the way that you were using that vocabulary. But now you're having an AI system that is not only recommending words to you, but recommending structures to you, you know, telling you to rearrange your thoughts, or giving you thoughts even. And I think there's some strengths in that, and of course some concerns. But I don't know. It's an interesting time. My school is looking at IBM's Watson, which would um, help language students, interact with the web page and the learning management system, so that if they had a concern, whether it was 2 a.m. or midnight, that they would always be able to get the answers to what they need. And I think that says something too. Sorry to drag on here and kind of bounce all over the place, but if I had a learning management system and I was interested in doing something with gamification, where I wanted, students to be endlessly rewarded for participating with an asynchronous learning, suite or materials, then there's something to be said. It's never going to tire, and it's going to keep track of those points, and it's going to push them on. And so I think there's a lot of positives there too. But it's a brave new world, and who knows where we're going to go. And it's literally evolving before our eyes, AI. And I'm kind of worried a little bit about where we go, a year.
Yes, we feel like that.
Yeah, I like the idea of chatbots, especially because I teach mainly speaking skills to my students, conversation skills. And I always wonder, well, unless they're talking to people outside the classroom, practicing their English, how else are they going to keep improving their speaking skills? And how nice would it be if they could just do that on their phone, not having to even talk to somebody, but talk to an AI, a chatbot. And if it's very natural, and if it even teaches them things, I think that would sound great. A question that's come up for a lot of teachers recently, and I was even talking to my co-workers in the office this past week about it, is in Korea, most teachers have just gone back to the classroom now, back to face-to-face teaching. For me, in my university, it's almost like we were never online. Remote teaching has just vanished from our landscape. It's like, okay, back to the old normal rather than a new normal. Raquel, do you see this as something that's going to happen now we're possibly phasing out of the pandemic, that remote teaching is just going to be put to one side and we're all back in face-to-face classes? Or is there going to be a hybrid? Is there going to be kind of more demand for remote teaching? What do you think?
Yeah, I've been observing, like my school went back to in-person, face-to-face teaching this year. I've been for around a month and a half, and it's been a great experience. But we sense there's a number of students from different age ranges that still keep online. So I would say that hybrid has found a place for a number of reasons, from because you live very far away from the school, because you can save time commuting, or there is some sort of mobility difficulty, or any sort of circumstance. So I believe I've personally seen that there has been this evolution in the way we teach, and teachers who would think before the pandemic that, okay, this is not for me, I'm not the tech savvy teacher you're looking for. Suddenly, everybody had to navigate through these troubled waters. And then the current challenge, in my opinion, but I don't think maybe challenge is the word, but one of the things we should be looking at is how to teach remotely online in a way that allows our students to be more participative and communicative. So I see both remote teaching, online teaching, and in-person teaching coexisting in harmony. I feel insecure about this concurrent teaching where the teacher needs to be with an audience of online students and an audience of in-person. I think that's extremely demanding because
Do you mean
teaching
is that at the same time in the classroom?
At the same time, yeah, there were attempts. Yeah, I personally find this one the one I don't feel that confident because it demands so much. And we know that once you are teaching, there is a whole planning going on because there is a target. It's not only, okay, I'm teaching English, so okay, there is this, let's say, grammar point here that I want. English language teaching is for communication. And most of our learners, even teenagers, they are projecting a few years ahead. I'm going to go through an online job interview for a remote job that's already going on. Like I'm based in São Paulo, and I also work remotely for England, and there are tools nowadays that make this task much faster and much better than it used to be when I started back in 2017. Yeah, because people are also more open to these communicative possibilities. So they have some insecurities. How do I look at the camera? A few things, how should I speak? And technical things, and also in terms of the language. So when we are teaching a language, we know that there are dreams behind these process, because the person who's there having classes wants a better job, wants to travel abroad, wants to have friendship out of their everyday routine, wants to see the world. And I believe remote teaching has brought us that. Technology has brought us that. But it's important, and I see sometimes in Brazil, it makes me worried, is that some people say, okay, now we are back to in-person. I don't want to see technology anymore. But why not? Because of this notion that you have to be 100% using some sort of tool. So when this understanding, may that be augmented reality, virtual reality, or even streaming or videos. I also say social media. There's a lot of potential using Instagram, Reels for teaching and learning and actually getting our students to take part. Like I showed you 2 examples. I opened a post here and they go on and share their perspectives, they self-correct, and they share this to other people. So I think there is no going back to what it was, to sum it up. But there is a looking ahead and making sure that the generation of teachers who are training, who are studying to become teachers at the universities, they have this opportunity. And not only, okay, so I finish my course, I learn all the methodology, and I learn about how to use a course book and all the things that are part, but then when I start teaching, there is this whole new world of things I haven't learned when I was at university, thinking of the younger generations.
Yeah. Do you see it the same way, James? Remote teaching is here to stay, or perhaps depends on the teaching context?
I think we've already seen it evolve. Like I would say at the beginning of the pandemic, we all, in an emergency, sort of jumped onto remote. And we're seeing that over the course of the last 2+ years, it has moved, maybe from more of a remote emergency sort of situation to online. Like I feel comfortable in this space. one of the interesting things for me was, again, in the classroom, and I love being in the classroom, and I don't want to give a false impression, but um, in the classroom, you see your class as one thing. And one of the things that really surprised me with being online, it happened right away, was, seeing into another world of the student. Often it was uh, their den or their kitchen or whatever, and the cat or their dog is going by every once in a while. And so while there was increased anxiety, maybe for some being online, there was also, in some ways, more connections to, there's a bit of an artificial construct in a classroom, right? You're in four walls, and there's some positives to that, because you're co-creating together. But there's also some real interesting things to be able to see into other pieces of their life. And so I think, and of course, them into ours, right? So I think there's some positives there. I don't see it going away. I mentioned earlier, one of the things that we're doing now is a hybrid model for some of our classes because of demand, where we have some students who are online and some that are face-to-face, and there's not enough of either one. And I have those same concerns that Raquel mentioned about, it's you're having to spend time with both groups, But at the same time, we've seen the prices drop of these hybrid systems. At the start of the pandemic, they were tens of thousands of dollars, and now that technology, the systems that I were talking about, is a matter of hundreds of dollars instead. And it's amazing what they can do. They track the dominant voice in the room and cut out the other noise, so that the student's attention is attracted to whoever is the one that's meant to be speaking. And they track with the video and with the sound. And of course, it can be projected so that you're always in a room with everyone else, seeing them. I don't know if we're fully there yet. I think that's an area that we'll see growth and change, and maybe it will develop still. I would hate to lose some of the progress that we've got. I feel like that several of the students that I've got to see over the course of the pandemic might not have actually come. They may not have ventured here either because they couldn't financially afford to, or because maybe they had a physical or other othering ability that they might have felt self-conscious about. And so I'd hate to lose some of those gains that we've got over the last couple of years. And I think there's some opportunities there. But having said that, myself, one of the things that excites me most, and when I saw students actually walking down our halls again, it warmed my heart, to be able to see them. But I love building things physically. Like, I don't want to lose that either. I see that there maybe be some opportunities to have, a bit of both. Right now, our classes are physical face-to-face classes Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, then virtual classes Tuesday and Thursday. And I don't know if that's the best configuration. I wouldn't put that out there, but it opens up some really interesting spaces, where before, you'd have to commute, and
Yeah.
maybe a portion of your day is spent now, having to get lunch on campus. Maybe you can't meet that bank appointment that you really have been dying to do, or whatever. But having that sort of mixed modality maybe allows you to do some of those things, as well as still get your work done on time and all of those pieces. So I think with the metaverse, around the horizon, I only expect to see more integration of these sorts of things happen. And I'm really looking forward to what we could do with that. But I think this type of tool is just another tool in the toolbox, like the Gestetner was, like decades ago, where you'd have to, people were afraid of that technology then, right? As they have been about everything else. And over time, I think you realize I can use it in this way to facilitate the human element of what I'm going to do. Because at the end of the day, I think, as Raquel was saying, the reason you learn a language is to accomplish a dream. You have a vision in your head of what you will be like as a successful language learner. And that involves sharing and communicating with other people. I mean, you don't bother to learn a language unless you want to interact with other people. And so there's always going to be an interactive element, and there's always going to be a coach or a mentor or a teacher that's going to help facilitate that with some form of technology, and I don't think that'll be lost.
Yeah, I think there's definitely still a demand for online classes. I'm sure if all my students were surveyed, I'm sure you'd get perhaps half the students saying they would prefer a Zoom class or some kind of, at least one kind of online component. But right now, for a lot of teachers in Korea, it is back to face-to-face teaching, back to commuting, no hybrid option at all. I just have one more question to ask you. If I'm a teacher now who wants to keep up to date with perhaps the next technology that all teachers will be required to use in their classrooms. Once upon a time, it was learning how to use a projector or an MP3 player. What would be one piece of technology you'd recommend teachers start learning now so that they can keep up to date with where teaching is heading? How about you, Raquel?
Definitely possibilities that involve mobile learning and using the cloud possibilities in your phone. And accessing things here rather than, okay, so I can prepare my class only if I have a computer. Because there are certain beliefs in the teacher's staff room. Okay, if you go there, okay, so if I have to prepare class, I need a laptop. No, you don't. You can prepare your class here, and you can think of the possibility, like if you're teaching teenagers, they are click, click, click here. Oh, so think of something that could be useful rather than you share summaries of things. We don't share anything. They collaboratively come up with something because you assign them, like James mentioned, we mediate, we guide the learning process. It's not like, okay, so you have this summary study here. No, we don't have this summary. We're going to have that now. But everybody's in charge of something. And then if for any reason one of the students misses a class, they can access, for instance, I use for that purpose Google Classroom. So it's like a social network. There are other, I've used Edmodo already, and I believe there may be other possibilities where they can access even when they are not attending the class synchronously. Sometimes students who are away even say, hi, I'm here. It's kind of like, look, something happened. I couldn't attend the class, but I'm here. So I believe possibilities in the cloud. And I, just to complement what I'm saying, look for teacher experience, follow things. I share what I learned teaching classes in the blog. And here there are posts about autonomy, strategies for remote teaching, the VR, the challenges we faced with internet connection, for example, emergencies and lots of things here. And I follow other teachers, and I'm also part of, in social media, follow organizations like the Korea ELT, for instance, or LTC from IATFO, or the Brazilian Brastiso, which is the association in Brazil, because that's how we learn. We learn from each other.
I think that's right. Yeah, especially what you said with students, if they can't come to classes, or another way they can keep up to date. A lot of teachers in Korea right now have had at least 3-4 students every week missing classes because they're testing positive for coronavirus. And it's always right now, okay, see you in 1 week, and they don't get a week of English learning unless we provide something online. Thankfully, I've already, from previous semesters being online, I pre-recorded a lot of material so I can give that to them. But yeah, if we could make that something that's permanent that students can always go to, that would be great. And Raquel's great links there. Check the description for this video.
I shared this link so you can access all the blog posts. I frequently share footage of what happens in class too.
Yes, and actually just right there, Siri was talking to me, so it happened again. Yeah.
I'm not sure I understand.
Doesn't understand that one, I don't know. And before Siri derails this conversation, James, what piece of technology would you recommend?
Before I recommend something, you mentioned the overhead, and I have a little story about that. Because I think so often we're told, like, you got to embrace the next technology. And, I think you have to embrace something, right? You have to look at your tools and build on what you've got. And I remember seeing a class long after the overhead was already passé. And the teacher came in with a number of strips of acetate in a little box, all labeled and whatnot. And they told this story. I forgot what the story was. And they placed the acetate strips to tell the story on the overhead, and it created a shadow display. And I thought, this is something amazing. I've never seen anybody use an overhead like that to tell a story, like for English language. But how immersive, was that, right? Like it would have been fine to just tell the story with words, but as soon as the lights went down and these characters came to life, it had resonance, right? And that's what you want out of a lesson, is to be able to tell a story, to have it stick in your mind, and to have that learning objective stay. And I think whatever technology you're good at, get good at it, because you can always use it to facilitate what you're going to do, even if it is something as old as an overhead. I love maker spaces. I spend a lot of time in our university makerspace because I think it gives students an opportunity who are maybe more kinesthetic learners to to manifest what the product of their learning is in different ways. And so I would say there's real value, especially for women, in learning some coding. You may not use it, but having that language, because coding is a language as well, being exposed to that will influence the way you think about other things, I think, going forward. I look at my son right now, who, as part of a school project, he's working on a book review, and they gave them whatever mode that they wanted to create the output. And so he's working in Scratch, which is a very simplified gaming system to replicate that. And the thing that surprises me is he's not the best reader. He doesn't spend a lot of time reading, but he's spent a considerable amount of time building that game to represent the summary of that content. And there's something to be said about that, to spend that amount of time on something. It makes it maybe transcendent. So learn, articulate, learn H5P, like that's something that doesn't have much of a cost. Maybe work in Beyond or something like that with video, whatever you choose, or 360 virtual tours. Just get good at it, and use it for a purpose. Like, don't just use it to use it. Think about what you actually want to teach with it, and then think of what you need to use to apply that and communicate that in the best way forward, and learn that's what I would say.
Thank you, James and Raquel. I thought this has been an extremely insightful conversation, and I've no doubt many people listening will really enjoy everything you've had to say. So thank you very much. Check out James and Raquel's great work in the description for this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time. Thank you very much.